This is Inside the Heart of Change, brought to you by Accenture.
Let there be change.
Hello there, and welcome to Inside the Heart of Change, the podcast series by Accenture. My name is Sheetal, and this is where we discuss cutting-edge ideas and technologies with thought leaders, both from Accenture and the wider industry. Now, on this episode, we're going to explore how communications companies can make a wise pivot to becoming a platform-enabled ecosystem player, orchestrating one-to-many enablement and position their businesses for profitable growth. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the ongoing disruption from OTT providers has put B2B communication companies under pressure. But the biggest threat is not disruption, it is inaction. Now, these companies have long been dominated by one-to-one enablement, where users buy a hard bundle of services and connectivity for a single fee. So on today's episode, our experts will explain how communication companies can successfully embrace new concepts and technologies that will alter the way the industry works. We will also examine the transforming value of tech that will shape the future, 5G, IoT and Edge Computing, and enable change for businesses and the workforce. We also talk about the changing parameters for talent in such a dynamic industry. Our speakers on the podcast are Nipun Sahni, Vice President, Global Business Development, Tejas Networks; Mathangi Sandilya, Managing Director, Global Technology Lead for Communications, Media and Technology Clients at Advanced Technology Centers in India, or ATCI; and Bibin George, Managing Director, Lead Intelligent Edge Practice with a cloud-first organization at ATCI. A warm welcome to all of our experts on Inside the Heart of Change, the episode that's called Network to Net Worth. Now, I spoke of disruption and how it's a major factor in the communication industry. And we hear this term bandied about a lot, like a buzzword. But Accenture's Disruptability Index research has confirmed that disruption has indeed become the norm in the communication industry. So what does that mean for the industry? And how can the communication industry control it? Mathangi explains how disruption is the new reality, not just for communication, but across the board.
I think that's a great start, frankly. The Disruptability Index, and let me just take a step back and explain what we did really with this. We analyzed 3,269 companies across 20 industries. So to your point that is the communication industry being disrupted, it's actually every industry that's getting disrupted. It's not just this industry, but this is also in the eye of the storm, so to speak. There were 98 industry segments that we looked at, and we also looked at 15 factors to gauge and contextualize both the current level of disruption and also susceptibility to future disruption. And the results are quite interesting. And what it also very clearly shows that this can be controlled. To your question again, is it even desirable to control? It's possible. But really what's important is that you should be constantly reinventing to improve. So this is not a one-stop intervention, but it's a continuous journey, and it requires companies and organizations to think about it at very different levels and different dimensions, looking at return on their fixed assets, looking at innovation and research development funding that they are looking at, what's the effectiveness of this and what's the potential for future growth, and also absolutely look at new and deeper ecosystem partnerships. I mean, this is more so when I say fixed assets, more so relevant in this industry today with the kind of investments they've done on the spectrum allocation for 5G specifically. It just becomes so imperative that they take a holistic look at this and look at it as a total enterprise reinvention at every point in time.
Nipun explains the change that is unfolding across the communication industry as it gears up to manage and even embrace new challenges. He even makes the case that communication companies are no strangers to disruption.
Great and interesting question. So no doubt we are in this age of constant change and a situation where not only there is change, but the pace of change is continuously accelerating, right? So the existing operators, the existing players in the market, I'm talking the communication service provider market, they are strongly entrenched with their customer base, and they get challenged every now and then with the new entrants who come with some or the other unique proposition and try to cause disruption, right? So So the approach that a particular industry player or operator, chooses on how to handle this change is very different depending on which side of the fence you are, because this is a huge market, right? The communication service providers market is about $4 trillion totally, right? Of which right now it's almost half and half, little more than maybe 2.5 trillion or so being taken by the communication service providers, so to say. And the other half right now with the ICPs, the internet content providers, which is combination of, call them OTTs, call them web scalers, call them cloud, but these are sort of the new age companies, right? So these new age companies, their revenues have been actually growing really, really fast, right? I mean, if you, again, I'll quote some numbers from Omdia here. The Omdia report basically says that in the last 5-6 years, 2016 to 2022, the breakup of the revenue between the CSPs and ISPs has almost getting inverted, where in 2016, this market, which is 4 trillion today, was about 3 trillion in 2016, 2/3 of it being communication service providers, 1/3 of it being the ICPs or the OTTs, the new generation companies, right? And now in end of 2022, this is almost where the ICPs, it's like 60-40, where it's 60% in favor of ICPs, 40% CSPs, right? Contrastingly, if you look at the capex or the money spent by these two categories of players, even today in 2000, end of 2022 actually, 2/3 of the capex globally out of the 600 million capex, almost 400 million worth of capex is, to build the networks, both fixed and mobile networks, is being spent by the communication service providers, and only 1/3 is spent by the ICPs. Now, the ICP capex has been also growing very steeply, like in relative terms. Right. 6 years back, they were less than $100 billion. Now they have crossed $200 billion. So relative to their own scale, they have more than doubled in terms of their capex spend, but relative to CSPs, they are still very small. So that obviously causes a big heartburn and a concern among the larger players. Right. And again, since this market is so huge, I think there is no one size fits all. The bigger CSPs, the tier ones, the AT&Ts and the Verizons and the Deutsche Telecoms of the world have a very different frame of reference and very different approach, and the smaller guys have to take a different strategy. So there is different things, but fundamentally, whether it's the big tier 1, tier 2 operators in CSPs or the smaller guys, there are only, any CXO, CTO, CXO, CEO of these companies, they only have 2 or 3 things that they need to manage, control, and improve, right? So those things being, number one, how do I control my cost, my capex and opex? Always the biggest concern. Number 2, right? How do I best monetize my existing assets, which is my network, right? How do I launch new services, innovative services that enables me to monetize my current assets? And then how do I come up with some unique proposition for my customers that other guys cannot, right? So these are the 2-3 things that they constantly think and figure out. And again, since I said between tier 1 and tier 2-3 market, the dynamics are very different. So in case of tier 1, for example, there is a lot of inertia. Like you have spent a lot of money, you have built a lot of huge network, you have lots of customers with whom you want to keep some stickiness factor, but it is not very easy for you to quickly change and evolve. So there is that inertia, but at the same time, they need to sort of constantly keep on changing. There is no other way. I mean, if they want to stay alive, stay relevant and grow, they definitely need to change. It's more of a question of how much is that pace of change and how do they execute it, but it is really out of question of not changing, right? So that's the dynamics on the larger tier 1, tier 2 operator. And then the smaller guys, disruptors, if you want to call it that way, they would take the bets on new technology, try to leapfrog and make some experiments with respect to, they're starting from a clean slate, right? So they don't have the burden of legacy. So they try to disrupt the market that way. So those are the dynamics, Sital, that we see playing out in the market. But even though we're talking about disruption, innovation, all of this stuff, let's also realize that communication industries and communication service provider business is really very much of a big brick and mortar type of business, right? It's like any other utility, like building roads or building a distribution network or a gas pipeline or electricity distribution. It is like that. So certain fundamental tenets of how you build your network and how you provide services to your customer are very, very critical. And those are things like reliability, right? Network uptime, complete fault-free operations. I mean, those are table stakes, non-negotiable requirements. So if you can't get, you don't remember your service provider by default, right? It's only when the service is either down or service is slow that you actually remember who your service provider is. So if he's invisible, that means he's doing very well. So that, continues to be and will always be a very, very, important thing that communication service provider need to worry about.
5G and IoT have been touted as game changers. That's not an exaggeration, given how 4G transformed entire industries, led to the explosion of sectors like food delivery, and drove rapid digitalization in several spheres. I mean, think about it. How many of us foresaw such digitization or that we'd be so reliant on it? Nipun tells us that 5G, IoT, etc. offer more opportunities to communication companies, opportunities that could help them differentiate their products and also perhaps offer competitive advantages.
So in 5G, even though a lot of operators have launched 5G services now, I still feel that we are still in very, very nascent stages of seeing the real promise of 5G in terms of end application, in terms of use cases, right? Remember in the previous Gs, right, the 2Gs and 3Gs and 4Gs, entirely new industries or sub-segments of the industries got created and built up through those Gs, right? Whether it is the ride-sharing industries with the food delivery or home delivery industries, these did not exist, and the previous generations of mobile technologies have created those industries, right? So similarly, 5G has a lot of promise. There are three broad categories in which the 5G use cases get classified. The first one being enhanced mobile broadband, which means faster speed. It is, you can say 4G++, faster speed, more bandwidth, more immersive experience, virtual reality, augmented reality, things of that nature. So on this first front, I think we are already there. We're getting 5G signals now. We are already feeling the benefits of it. But in my mind, this is just one application. The other two applications not really seeing too much of uptick as of now. And that's where I see a lot of opportunities. And let me walk you through the other two categories of applications. The second one is what you call a massive machine-to-machine communications, right? Okay. So here you think about tons and tons of sensors and transmitters and IoT devices located everywhere in your home, in your office, on the road in between your home and office. They're pretty much omnipresent, right? And these devices, again, have a very different bandwidth requirement, speed requirement typically would be very not too high. Latencies in some use cases may be low, in some cases high, but then the nature of this segment in terms of the network requirement is very different. The second segment, which is the massive machine-to-machine communication. And the third segment of use cases of 5G is what you call the URLLC, ultra reliable, low latency communication, right? So here you think of mission critical things where latency is super key. Think about autonomous cars, think about robotic surgeries, think about precision control manufacturing with robots, or advanced gaming with a lot of low latency. So this is the third category of applications, of which the real use cases and adoption is not even started, right? So then in summary, we are really at the tip of the iceberg right now with respect to the potential of ISPs and it's the potential of 5G and the ability of 5G to disrupt change, various industries, right? Here again, I think from a communication service providers, what can they do? I mean, communication service providers, rather than thinking of themselves as bandwidth or connectivity or a pipe provider, they need to look at different industries or different verticals, be it education or healthcare or energy or smart cities, or, there are so many of those verticals. And, each vertical has a very different requirement, right? So coming up with some kind of bespoke solutions that are tailored to the needs of the specific use cases in specific verticals, which are quite different. Right. I think that's where these communication service providers can, there is a lot of room for innovation and there is a lot of room for these guys to change the game and grow their revenues as well as profitability. Yeah. So this, in my mind, is like once in a lifetime opportunity where, enterprises today are looking to build their own private networks, for example, right? Now, for the communication service provider, one way to interpret that is, this is a competition. I used to build network and now the enterprise guy is building his own network, right? And another way to look at it is, who is the best guy to build those networks? Is it those enterprises or is it these communication service providers who have had multiple decades of experience in building networks? Obviously, the answer is the second, right? So therefore, these communication providers, they need to play to their strengths, all of this experience and knowledge base. And this, in my mind, is the sort of unique competitive advantage, the moat that they have built for themselves. And they need to leverage that moat to create those value-added solutions for enterprises. Now, how do they create those value-added solutions, so to say, right? So there are certain very interesting technologies that are coming into play for those value-added solutions, which are nicely dovetail with 5G and IoT. So one such thing, for example, is this concept of network slicing. Think of the network as a platform. It's a platform which is dynamic and software reconfigurable, very much like the cloud market, right? So characteristics of think of the cloud market where you had pay-per-use, elastic scalability, self-service. So all of those characteristics of the cloud market, if you saw the industry is now replicating that or trying to replicate that or in the process of replicating that for the networking market. So the concept of network slicing would allow an operator to actually dynamically on the fly adapt the capability and the resources and the topology, even the topology of a network to service different kind of use cases, right? So as I said, different verticals, different industries, use cases are very different, right? And when you basically segment it that way, slice your network differentially, you can also price your network differentially, right? The pricing that you can command for, let's say, a mission critical remote robotic surgery versus a data collection from a sensor, the price points and the service levels are so different, right? So this is where the operators can really step up and leverage these new technologies to create those differential services and price those different services in different manner.
As the world waits for the promise of 5G and IoT to materialize, sort of like waiting for the magic to unfold, we do well to understand that any industry or service is only as strong as its supply chain. At the risk of sounding cliched, the supply chain of the future will be a smart supply chain. Mathangi helps us understand what constitutes the smart supply chain of the future for the communication industry.
A smart supply chain in this industry really is about bringing in distributed machines, distributed computing, multi-access edge computing, and possibly even cryptographic connectivity, which then means enabling and securing a transaction in a field with such a whole lot of connected objects is going to be super critical. And this also means evolving how businesses can behave in a very different way. So what you thought of as a supply chain today is going to be completely disrupted. The players in that supply chain are very different. The players in the supply chain are not just bringing in hardware, but also bringing in intelligence in that hardware, embedded intelligence in that hardware. And the point of control is changing, not just at just the user equipment level, but also at edge data centers. And that's really another control point that is, this industry can truly monetize on if they work on this in a very, very smart way.
Another tech innovation that will play a big part in shaping the future of communication is edge computing. Bibin explains how edge computing will help businesses of all kinds reimagine communication and the overall customer experience. He also explains how edge computing will be a significant driver of increased efficiency.
So edge will enable business to really reimagine the experience for people, the purpose, and profitability. Now, putting computing at the edge will allow enterprises to improve how they manage and use physical assets, creating this new and interactive human experiences. Now, to your question, let me share a few industry examples, right? Let's go to retail. Now, a flexible and customer-centric experience is really at the heart of the store of the future for the retail industry. And edge is going to be the core in building this capability. For example, you all know about frictionless store checkout experience. Now, researchers indicate that 86% of customers have left a store when they see long checkout line, and this is missed sales for the enterprise. Now, how do we really bring edge here? An edge network in the store processing data collected by on-site cameras using AI that is trained to recognize the inventory, allowing customers to walk past the kiosk that accurately charges their account without a waiting line. Amazing, right? Now, it's not just the customer experience, but also for the stores, providing accurate inventory management, supply chain, preventing thefts is all possible with Edge, right? So that's on the retail.
Right.
If I just take another industry like healthcare, now you see robot-assisted surgeries that make it easier, not only for surgeons, but also less invasive for patients, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You move into manufacturing, improving quality of products by bringing intelligent and automated inspections on the edge. And that really drives a significant efficiency for manufacturing. If you look at energy and utility companies, can improve their health of assets in remote, unreachable areas using AI, enabled maybe drones, for example, right? Now, you asked about the challenge. Now, what is all of these examples? What it has one theme in common, which is computing on the edge, which is enabling enterprise to run intelligent applications real-time, reliably, and at the source. Now, this will require on-premises ruggedized edge infrastructure, which requires significant CapEx and OpEx. The good news is that there are emerging solutions from the network operators, like multi-access edge compute enabled by 5G, that will help enterprise to cut down on the total cost of ownership of the edge infrastructure. There are a number of innovative infrastructure and services from hyperscalers like Azure Stack Edge, AWS Outpost, Google Anthos. Now, ultimately, these solutions allow companies to innovate faster, stand up new products and services, and more quickly, and not only improve the customer experience, but also opens up possibilities for new revenue streams.
In light of such rapid changes, how can communication companies become connected industry orchestrators? Mathangi believes that this is an aspect that will see significant emphasis and spend from companies. Nipun says communication companies need to transform how they perceive themselves. They are not mere providers of connectivity, he says. They need to consider their role at the application level and service level as solvers of real-world challenges.
So I think, again, I would say the service providers need to think to become a connected industry orchestrator. They need to, again, change their frame of mind from being just a pipe provider, connectivity. Okay, I mean, basic layer 0, layer 1, layer 2 level, pipe versus going at application level, going at use case level, going at service level, and solving real world problems. And different industries or categories of industries have different sets of problems. In fact, we have been working with some of the Tata Group companies of late, ever since Tejas has become part of Tata Group, and we are getting a lot of this exposure of different Tata Group companies, having those problems. So those problems that, let's say, a steel company versus an automobile company versus a pharma company faces is very different, right? So for service providers to understand those challenges and then come up with solutions, and again, in those solutions, the key mantra, the trick of the trade, so to say, is end-to-end, right? So think about solving the problem end-to-end rather than saying, I am just, one piece and I provide this. So they need to creatively sometimes strike partnerships. But net, they should be thinking solutions. They should be thinking real-world problems that they solve for specific industries rather than just being a connectivity provider.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is a great question, Sheetal, because what the communications companies are realizing today is this space on enterprises in multiple dimensions. This is really where the spend is going to be, because we are looking at using the current install base that they have. There is a lower spend on fixed line connectivity as far as large enterprises are concerned. So that's also a threat that they have to overcome. On top of it, big tech like our Googles and Amazons and Microsoft of the world are getting into this space with their enterprise customer base and actually getting into the space of connectivity for large enterprises. So this is exactly the opportunity that the CSPs have to capitalize on, which is move beyond being a commoditized connectivity provider that sells basic data, voice, and connectivity at the very basic level on like simple one-on-one service fee models, to move to what we would say as step one, which is connectivity plus plus. So provide some some value-added solutions on top of connectivity, be it a wide area network in the context of large enterprises, or provide multi-access edge computing with their own full stacks, and also provide additional digital services. This would be step one, and the second would be to build in solutions that could be very industry specific, verticalized solutions, which can then help them become an orchestrator in that industry. And when I say industry specific, I'm talking about solutions around healthcare, around operating smart cities, for example, and so on. So which then gets them into the core of another industry, but also becoming the orchestrator to provide that core, and not just being relegated to a connectivity provider.
Vision, innovation, drive, and progress. Find out what goes on inside the heart of change. Brought to you by Accenture.
Speaking of connectivity providers, how do these entities become more efficient and agile at selling products like data, voice, and connectivity services? Mathangi says that it requires a shift in mindset to understand what is relevant to customers, and that companies need to think about IT and network in a holistic manner.
Sure. I think to change the way they are selling products and services requires number one, a mindset shift in how they're going to come out with offerings that are really relevant to the customers, as well as what they can understand about what their customer preference is going to be, not just what the preference is today, but what the preference is going to be. And for that to happen, they need to have clear investment freed up towards understanding these channels better, and also to understand what are competitive cost structures and flexibility that they can build in on their existing connectivity and also additional services that they're selling, those solutions. On top of it, they also need to change their internal IT landscape to facilitate a quick go-to-market on some of these services, starting from possibly unified product catalog, looking at virtualization of the network so that the service level stitching and coming up with offers at a service level can be done quickly, and customer-centric services can be brought in, which also means they need to think about both IT and network in a holistic way, and bring in agile and DevOps methodologies across the band. It's not just for their own internal applications, but also for the network. Think of the network also as software, and also bring in that same methodology and rigor as they would do on their IT landscape. And I mean, this transformation from focusing on what I can sell to what the customer really is looking for, and coming up with those micro interesting services and digital services that are customer centric, will require an overhaul of how they've been operating all this while. It will also require a number of technology interventions, be it RPA for automation or artificial intelligence, to understand, like I mentioned, not just what the customer preference is today, but what will be, and then coming up with offers that are very, very relevant for customers.
Bibin says the technology landscape is evolving to enable edge computing, and he tells us about the technologies that underpin progress in this area. Mathangi explains that Connectivity ++ helps communication companies evolve their core business to a platform-based model predicted on connectivity, proximity, and trust.
So there are several technologies that are driving the edge computing, and let me share 4 foundational ones which are most important. The first being the IoT and the connected devices. Now, like I said, these are the unique data sources that need to be secured and registered on the cloud, and edge will reside near or on these data sources. Now, at many of these edges, the power available could be limited, it could be low, and that is where technologies like neuromorphic computing that can make really a difference for ultra low power and real-time computing. Now, let me also tell you that Accenture is working in collaboration with our Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore with the Neuronics Lab in this area of neuromorphic computing. And we're working in research areas to bring sustainable vision and audio algorithms at the edge. Now, that's the first one, right? And now moving on, the second foundational pillar, I would say, is AI on the edge. Now, this is going to provide real-time analytics on the data generated at the edge, and hence bringing intelligence on the edge.
All right.
The third is about the advent of containers, services, data mesh architectures, providing uniformity of cloud and the edge continuum. Hyperscalers are actively providing a number of innovative solutions in this space. And the fourth and also important is the software-defined networks, 5G, the multi-access edge compute, the MECs, which is bringing the distributed computing capabilities at the edge of the network on high bandwidth, and ultra reliable and low latency environments.
Okay, so when we talk about moving the needle to becoming a connectivity plus provider, what we're really referring to is what's that last control point which is not hardware centric and which can be a lot more controlled remotely. As long as it's a software, we could do that, and that's the last bastion we are getting to, which is the network. And if you look at how enterprise networks are panning out today, there's a lot more programmability on software-defined wide area access networks. There's also a lot more ability to control how we change and implement parameter changes on these networks through a number of the technology interventions that come in. Our focus as CSPs should then be to look at providing value-added solutions on top of these virtualized networks, and also make this open enough so that we can implement and integrate with the existing ecosystem without having to look at siloed operations that will force you to work with only one single vendor and so on and so forth, which also then accelerates our ability to bring in new services for our customers. So as long as we can keep our solutions open, we can make the integration easy and also ensure that we can partner with the larger ecosystem without letting go of our control points. We have an ability to provide these digital services better. I spoke about technology interventions, but that's something that is probably to be looked at not as just an enabler, but actually a competitive advantage. If we can think of it as that foundation platform that we can take through, that's really where we can change the game as a communication service provider. And this requires the same rigor in terms of lifecycle management, maintaining versions, maintaining your patch management as you would do with your application landscape. And when supporting enterprise customer, there are absolutely important milestones and checkpoints that are needed to make this experience seamless for a customer, like the sales enablement platform, the service platform, self-healing solutions that will help them address a large part of their troubleshooting on their own without the need to having to call the CSP for everything. I mean, today you don't call, how many times do you call an Amazon call center?
Right.
Probably once in a quarter, perhaps, but that's about it. And that's the level of service experience that we should be thinking about as CSPs.
Accenture's research indicates that fully investing in AI and human-machine collaboration can boost revenues by 46%. Now, what does that really mean for businesses? Mathangi believes it's about point solutions and using these solutions to glean the right insights at the right time. Nipun says that disruption by AI and ML can be very useful if they can be leveraged to offer advantages.
No, and this is very interesting, and I think it's about those point solutions, but also ensuring that those point solutions can be stitched together to get the right insights at the right time. So I'll take an example. We are talking about making sure that in the world of large connected devices, which is what we are expecting to happen with 5G, you are running a network operations center as a communication service provider. Now, the typical example of what happens in a NOC is there are alarms when something doesn't work, and you then look at the alarms and define and come back with solutions that you need to do to ensure that these alarms can be addressed if they are true, and if it's not true, figure out that this is a false alarm, for example, and ignore that. Imagine the noise that would happen when you have billions of devices connected and your operation center is looking at this. The correlation engine that you need to build in order to understand whether this is truly an alarm that needs an intervention or is an alarm that needs an intervention but can be done because you know exactly what needs to be done, has been done in the past, and it's a simple intervention that can be automated, and or if it requires requires somebody, an agent, to go down to the site and actually fix it. All of this depends on that correlation engine that you can build. And in that correlation engine, the most important thing is to look at past data, identify patterns, and fix your solutions. This is not possible just humanly, but it's also not possible with just artificial intelligence and models. That model will need to be constantly learning because your alarms are going to be changing. That model will need to be constantly looked at to bring in that automated intervention that can be triggered when the pattern is the right match. And there'll also be a manual intervention to make sure that you're validating this and feeding back into your training models. This whole cycle is going to be a constant learning curve. And the more we can get to the automated scenario than otherwise is where you're really utilizing the knowledge and validation of your engineers on the ground to doing something even more important, like actually developing the model than actually sitting and fixing those alarms. So that's the power of investing in something like AI and bringing it to a very real practical scenario, which today might be good to have, but tomorrow is a must have with the number of devices that we're expecting to get connected.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. The artificial intelligence and the machine learning is, I'll put these technologies in the bucket of, you call it AI ML or, data science, predictive analytics, as well as generative artificial intelligence, both the two categories. I think they are impacting all industries and all avenues, and our industry by any means is not immune to that. It is actually taking a lot of benefit of it. So, for example, the kind of products and solutions that we build, we provide product, hardware and software that runs these networks, right? So applying artificial intelligence to these products and solutions, you can actually do a lot of things ahead of time, predict what could go wrong, right? So looking at a lot of data on your network and traffic patterns and fault patterns and issues in the network. The AI is obviously, when there is a lot of data, it's way more intelligent than a human being. So they can, spot those trends and predict it ahead of time. So it is causing a disruption, and it is going to change the way we are used to seeing, observing, using, and experiencing networks altogether.
Communication companies can transform their product and service development mindset to an innovation-led mindset. Bibin and Mathangi help us understand how this can be achieved.
Great question. So, firstly, the number of devices or things are exponentially increasing. Now, Gartner predicts by 2030, there will be 18 billion things on the planet. And this is driving exponential data growth. Now, these devices are really blurring the boundaries between digital and the physical world. Now, today, on an average, there are 4 connected devices used per person. And this is expected to increase to about 9.5 devices per person by 2025. Right. Most importantly, this means it's going to drive more meaningful and immersive customer experiences. Now, simply put, Edge is enabling enterprises to integrate the digital and the physical worlds together. Now, there are a number of imperatives that are driving this, right? And I'll call out the 4 key imperatives that will come. Mm-hmm. The first one, we call it as law of physics. It's all about the speed. When the decisions must be done at the speed of light and there is data to be analyzed and acted quickly, we need Edge. For example, telesurgery, self-driving cars. That's the first one. The second is the law of economy. Now, when data is generated in high volume, right, it's very expensive to send the entirety of this data to the cloud, and we'll need Edge. Let me remind you that, again, the prediction is that 75% of the generated data on the edge will also be consumed at the edge by 2025. The third imperative is what we call as the Murphy's Law. Mm-hmm. We all know this, and this is when the processing must be uninterrupted. Even when the network connections are down, we will need Edge. For example, remote operations, mining, oil exploration, where connectivity can often be a challenge. Last and very important is the law of land. And this is important because there are interactions and information that are private, confidential, regulated, and again, we need Edge, right? So you can see there are many imperatives, but these are extremely important, and this makes Edge a very, very important business case to really have enterprises to drive their business transformation.
I think that mind shift change from actually moving towards innovation is really what's going to unlock the next revenue stream for this industry more than ever. I mean, there are a number of examples, but some of it that really stands out, and I can call that out, is what we did with KDDI and Japan taxis in the growth markets region. This is about understanding. It's a ride share solution, but looking at the last mile connectivity at runtime and providing that as a service that can be called by the service is offered by KDDI. It's in conjunction with Japan taxis, but it's actually provided by a joint venture that Accenture and Arise Analytics have come together to bring artificial intelligence at that particular point in time, and taking into account every parameters that will contribute to that is one example of what we could do very differently. I mean, it's an innovative solution for sure. It's going beyond connectivity, and it's also bringing in the larger ecosystem play together. Another example, I mean, this was something that's addressing a B2C need. If I take another example in the B2B space, which is really on the large enterprises scenario, we did an interesting pilot with Stellantis, which is an automobile manufacturer in the LATAM region. And what we are doing there is, for one of their plants, we are automating the quality inspection checks as well as customization that's required using advanced analytics and video solutions. And this is provided by a private 5G network that Telecom Italia Mobile is offering for Stellantis in that one plant of theirs. I mean, they're able to do this intervention in the assembly line because of the private network, but also that additional solution around embedding intelligence and looking at video analytics to arrive at what was promised to the customer and what's actually being delivered is a point intervention that's going to make it easier for Stellantis to operate their assembly line and run it and take it to other plants as well. So that's about thinking differently and not just about connectivity, and also bringing in, like I said again, bringing in the right partners to get these solutions on board.
Absolutely. We discussed disruptive technologies like 5G and edge computing, enabling a transformational experience for communication companies. But that also changes the requirements in terms of talent. So what skill sets will the workforce of the communication industry have to acquire or train in to have a successful and rewarding career?
Sure. So as we discussed earlier, edge computing is enabled by a diverse set of technologies. One can start from any of the technology pillars and skill up on edge. For example, there could be embedded engineers who can start with IoT and connected devices. There could be data scientists and AI engineers who can start with AI for edge, for real-time predictions, for example. Could be cloud full-stack engineers, can start to learning orchestrating their applications workload using containers, services, data mesh. There could be network engineers who can start with software-defined networks, 5G, multi-access edge compute, right? So cross-pollinating skills across these capabilities really will put one on the journey of coming into an edge engineer and edge architect. Now, if you're not working in any of these and still want to pursue a career in edge computing, can always do with trainings provided by many of the open source training platforms, trainings provided by the number of hyperscalers, right? So these are absolutely possible. Now, at Accenture, we also have created a career track for edge computing, which allows our engineers with diverse skills to upskill in the edge computing space.
To figure out what kind of talent will be in demand going forward, I think we can look at what are the big trends that we see playing out in our industry, right? What are those key trends? And each one of those trends, if you ride that wave of that one particular trend or a combination of 2-3 of those trends, your talent or your skill will definitely be in a lot of demand and you will have a nice, bright future. Sure. So what are those trends, right? And the way we see those trends panning out in our network, right? So the artificial intelligence and the machine learning and data science, all of these getting applied to networks is clearly one huge trend. A lot of the companies in our domain have invested and are investing big time in this area. And so if you develop skills in this area, obviously there is a lot of, I would say the future, to whatever extent I can foresee it, this will just keep going on and on and on to the point it becomes scary. So there is no question about that first trend on AI ML category. Second trend would be, again, a very interesting dynamics playing out in our industry is is disaggregation. So see, the equipment business has been dominated by few key equipment vendors, and each one of them has sort of built their own value prop in terms of an end-to-end solution. So that it becomes a monolithic black box where the operator does not have control, observability, being able to change things, being able to mix and match things. So one big trend that is happening in our industry is especially driven by all the big operators, the big 5, the big 7 operators, as well as all of the governments. The countries and the governments are also heavily focused on this. Is can we disaggregate this black box? Can we break this down into smaller pieces, smaller standard blocks, which interoperate with each other through standards-based interfaces, so that you can do a mix and match of hardware and software vendors? You're not dependent on one. In one sense, there is a benefit. You have one neck to catch, but that one neck, whoever is the incumbent in your network, would also charge a lot of premium, and I can even say that abuse incumbency sometimes. So if you can break that down, so that is the disaggregation, the open architecture. Again, very similar to open source software, but I would still say that this is again a trend. It is like a wave in an ocean which cannot be stopped one way or the other. This is going to happen, and because of this wave, rather than being just a point provider of equipment of a certain category, a role of system integrator will also become very key. Right. So if I talk of Indian companies, there is a tremendous opportunity because they can take these building blocks from multiple OEM vendors like Tejas, like Ericsson, like Nokia, and provide solutions. So disaggregation was the second key trend on which I see lots and lots of future and way to go. Third one, again, Seetal, is on the security side. So this is something that I'm personally observing very closely in last few months and last 2-3 years, is that previously when operators were selecting vendors, there used to be two questions, right? Are you technically compliant and what is your price? But these days, in the new RFPs, especially from the Western world, in big way in India also, the first question they ask is about security, about trust. Can I trust your equipment? How do I make sure that I don't get attacked or that my information doesn't get siphoned out? And also you can dovetail this with the big picture geopolitics that is playing out with the Ukraine war. I mean, started off with the trade war in the Trump days. So security is again a very key thing. And sort of linked to security is the fourth trend that I would like to say is that there are multiple parallel supply chain ecosystems being built, right? So think like 10, 15, 20 years back, there used to be like China used to be the factory of the world, and US used to be the hub of innovation and all the new companies, and India used to be the services provider. We excelled in creating that machine, predictable, large scale hiring and skilling and leveraging the manpower kind of machinery out of services. So that's how the industry was like 10 or 15 years back. Today, ideally, each country wants to build their own independent, self-sufficient ecosystem. If they cannot build it within the country, they want to build it with group of their allied countries, right? So, US and Europe, for example, is one block, and there are other blocks of this nature. So this trend again creates, for example, even if you look at India, like there is so much focus on Atmanirbhar Bharat. The Indian government is really focusing, giving lots and lots of industry, never seen before. Tejas has been in product business for 23 years, never seen before in the last 5, 7, 10 years. The kind of support that is available for the industry to offset the handicap that we have in India for manufacturing, for product development, for design is huge, right? So I would say that fourth one is manufacturing and design and product development, not just services where you are giving a particular service in a particular silo, but end-to-end product, end-to-end design and manufacturing. So these are the 3-4 trends, and for the talent, skilling and all that, people can pick one area, get expertise in one, and then move to few adjacent areas. And if you are good at 2 or 3 of these areas, then you are really a very, very wanted guy in the job market, basically.
Staying with that subject of talent requirements in the future of the communications industry, it is becoming increasingly clear that successful companies recognize the reality of digital transformations, that they also require people transformations. So how can organizations then reorganize and reskill their future workforces to capitalize on digitally enabled growth opportunities?
change is the only constant. I think we started our conversation with that, right? There is no fixed rule and there is no standard rule, and the rules that you say today will not be valid 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line, right? So you need to be constantly on the lookout. Many technologies came and went.
Right.
Did not get adopted. And in fact, in Tejas, we took bets on certain technologies. Some of them paid us very well. Some of the bets did not happen. But the key is that all the time, if you keep your focus on trying to figure out 3, 5, 7 years down the line, how is the world going to look like? Build your own, sort of opinion about it, get convinced about your own opinion, and then be a sort of original thinker, right? Don't be scared about that this is not the norm or this is not how people talk, right? I mean, as they say, the best way to predict the change is you be the change, right? So that is my own personal experience of being in this constantly ever evolving, fast changing domain of technology and communication industry. And this whole attitude about can do and a positive kind of attitude, right? So for any time when you're looking at a problem, there are 100 ways in terms of the roadblocks that you have to overcome the problem. So we are really not interested on those 100 hurdles. You have to find that one reason out of the 199 will be hurdles, but there is one reason on how you can be successful. You think about that and focus on that, and more often than not, you will see that you will be achieving success.
This is a great question, Sheetal, and I think number one is acknowledging that this requires a different intervention in the first place. That's the number one thing that organizations should do, and that's what we are seeing as well happening. Post the acknowledgement is also to look at how are you going to address this at different levels as well. And I would say that many of the new skills that we are looking at, we are seeing are not simple, and it doesn't just take a classroom training that you can go through to get person A or person B certified and take them through that topic. So there's a lot of hands-on understanding that's required. There's also a lot of on-the-job project training that is absolutely needed, and more so there is also that curiosity that every person should carry in order to experiment and explore. Some of these areas are so new. Some of these areas are also coming up, and we have the opportunity to even shape how they can be standardized. So this is really about willing to learn continuously, and also staying curious enough to understand where the trend will move. Having said that, it's not just about attitude. It's also basic aptitude around computing, understanding software engineering principles, and understanding the cusp of hardware and software. I think that's really the core for this particular domain.
Yeah. That was an insightful conversation on the challenges and opportunities that the communication industry is facing. And this industry is in the thick of it all. And one could even say that it's pretty close to the heart of change, considering the crucial role that technology plays in communication. From AI and ML to 5G and IoT, tech disruption is the new norm, and indeed the future for the industry and the people working in it. Looks exciting. Of course, before we wrap, a big thank you to our guests Mathangi Sandilya, Bibin George and Nipun Sahni for sharing their insights and experience with us. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Inside the Heart of Change. Thanks for listening.
This is Inside the Heart of Change, brought to you by Accenture.